August was overwhelming in a good and not so good way. This is my August wrap-up with a little bit of TMI. Hello book friends, it's Marilyn Maya and thank you for watching my channel. August, as I said in the teaser, was overwhelming. It was my birthday and I had planned to do a lot of videos. Not every day, but I wanted to do it like 4 times a week. I didn't quite make that, but now I'm getting a little bit of post-birthday anniversary blues, and I was feeling a little overwhelmed with not only with booktube, but life in general. But I can't come on here and just be always happy, and I have to be myself. So I wanted to just talk to you a little bit about why I felt a little bit down. I've read almost 50 books since the beginning of the year. And that was what I made for my goal on Goodreads. And yeah, I don't know if I'll make it, and I'm not really worried about making it or not, the goal. But what bothers me is that I haven't read that many 5-star books, and with the 50 books, with the almost 50 books that I've read. And I don't know if it's that my taste is just getting, is different, or it's that I'm not reading the books that usually make me so happy. I have found some books though, I have. And for those I'm grateful. For those books I'm grateful. And August was a very exciting month in my life because it was my 72nd birthday. People were just wonderful to me. And I don't usually socialize. I can't say I'm an introvert, but yeah, I kind of suffer from anxiety my whole life. And when life gets very hectic, it affects me, So, how do you feel? Do you get overwhelmed sometimes making videos or having to read a certain amount of books? I found that because I was making more videos, my reading was less. And I didn't like that part of it. I wanted to make more videos, but I also wanted to read more. And then of course it was the socializing. Anyway, I just wanted to tell you how I felt, a little overwhelmed. However, I have read some wonderful books this month, even if they're not too many. So without any further ado, and me being a crybaby about everything, let me just tell you what I read for Garb August. And they weren't garbage at all. Some of them were surprising. And I said this in a former video that I used to collect in my 20s Perry Mason books by Stanley Gardner. So I thought, let me see if I'm not saying they're trashy, but they're certainly pulpy. And I found a doozy in here. And it wasn't this first one, The Queenly Contestant. This was just for me, or meh. Yeah, it's about a 40-year-old something woman who goes to Perry Mason and she's trying to hide something in her past. And of course someone gets murdered, and the plot starts from there. But yeah, it was more of a 3-star read. However, this one, The Case of the Lame Canary by Stanley Gardner, really surprised me, and I'll tell you why. The plot, the story itself, the mystery wasn't great. I have to say that. However, it was kitschy. It was 30s. This book was written by Stanley Gardner all the way back. Now let me see when it was written, but it was in the 30s. And it says 1937. And you know, if you read books written by Perry Mason, books written by him that were later on, it was quite different. So I'll just tell you a tiny bit about the plot, because like I said, the story wasn't great, but everything else about the book was great. First of all, his secretary, Della Street, if you know her, if you watched the TV show, he was very, they were going on a whirlwind around the world trip. And I don't want to get into, you know, spoilers here, but there was a lot of romance in this book between Perry Mason and his secretary. And though Perry Mason character was more or less the same as he is in his later books, and so is Paul Drake, he takes a more active role in solving the case, and that was different. Usually, you know, you see him in the courtroom more or less. And Erle Stanley Gardner also wrote, you know, before he wrote the Perry Mason books, he was an attorney, and he started writing for the, you know, like the pulp magazines, the mystery magazines. And he wrote a lot of different characters until he settled on Perry Mason, which he wrote 80 books. And yeah, so this must be one of his earlier ones, because, you know, in the 30s. And you get a lot of beautiful 30s language. For example, and this is not language, but in the beginning of the book, there's two sisters involved, and one comes to Perry Mason's office with a lame canary, and he had a sore foot because someone cut his nails too close. And that's sort of, you know, the running gag, or not gag, but the running, you know, the mystery starts with the lame canary. But so in the beginning of the book, in the neighborhood, they always talk about this couple, one sister and her former boyfriend, or we don't know if it's her or her sister, but he's making violent love to her. And I mean, that kind of cracked me up, because I'm not sure what, you know, and then they go on and talk about it, you know, during, you know, that he was, you know, making love to her, violent love. And then it turns out he was taking her in her arms and telling her how much he loved her, and that was violent love. So, you know, there's a lot of 30s lingo in here that I really loved. But the story, yeah, it was meh. So I give this a 4 for the canary and for the words and, you know, just life. Like, this takes place, all his stories take place in California, and in the 30s, it seems like you can find people really quickly. There aren't that many people in California, so if somebody's missing, you can just like find them in like a day or two. And, you know, things like that made this book really special. So, you know, I thank you, Ollie, for doing Garb August, because you know, this was really, I hadn't read this before, and I was glad I read it. So, yeah, Garb August. Then I read a book that I took out of the library, and this is a 5-star read for me, and a very unexpected. I spoke about it. It's called Tiny Beautiful Things, Advice on Love and Life from Dear Sugar, by Cheryl Strayed, and she's the author of Wild. She's quite a person. I talked about this book before, but I just wanted to say that, you know, if you're, you know, don't like a little foul language, maybe you won't like this. But even if you don't, I would say pick it up for the beauty of her soul and her sage advice, because I found some answers to some issues that I was thinking about, you know, that were bothering me. So, you know, if me, it's, you know, here I am at 72, and I could say that this younger woman taught me something. She is, I think you should read this. I think Gina Stanier said that she loved this book when I introduced it. And I have to say that this is one of the best books that I've read this year. And I didn't read it like from beginning to end. I just picked out one of the advice columns and read one a day or something, and then I renewed it from the library. But I have to say also that that she is so smart and so good and so witty. She turned the whole advice column on its head. So instead of saying, this is what you should do, you're doing this wrong, you're doing this bad, she goes into her own life, and she's had quite a traumatic life, and tells you what she thinks. And at the end, she'll tell you, okay, maybe you can do this, or maybe, you shouldn't do this, but think about it, And it's a wonderful book. I give this 5 stars, and it was an unexpected. I just picked it up because I remembered the name. The last book I want to talk about, I can't give a star rating to. I wrote a few things down about it, but the reason I can't give it a star rating is because I don't think it was written for an American audience at first, though you can still get something out of it. It's Breasts and Eggs by Mieko Kawakami. And this book, I couldn't say it's a 5-star book because, this was written in 2 novellas, and that's what I wrote down. It was published separately as 2 novellas, and I guess you can see that when you read the whole thing. For me, it's a large book. It's like over 400 pages, and I don't read tomes usually, though I have been known to read them. So what is this about? It's about 3 women living in Tokyo and other places. One is near Osaka, and I know this area very well because I lived there. So what is so special about this book, and why can't I give it a star rating, even though I said there was some problems with it? This is written for the modern day Japanese woman and what they're going through, and maybe sometimes we won't understand it and think, oh, this is not well written. Or she's going off on a tangent. Yeah, there's a lot of minutia here about day-to-day life in Japan for a woman. And the title, Breasts and Eggs, have to do with the, so I wrote down what I thought. So Kawakami is exploring female self-determination through 3 women. One is a writer who, I'm not saying at all that this is autobiographical, but the writer's name is Natsuko Natsume. And throughout the book, everybody's asking her, oh, what a great pen name. And she says, no, this is my real name. And I wonder if this has meaning to it as well. And so her sister, Makiko, and her niece, Midori Iko. And the narrative is driven by these 3 women's individual relationships with their bodies and society's demands on them in Japan. And I say in Japan, though, with what's going on with Roe versus Wade, every woman could read this book and get something out of it. I'm not going to give it a star rating because I think that Kawakami wrote this for Japanese women, which is fine. And she's a very celebrated writer in Japan. It was translated by Sam Bett and David Boyd, and they did a great job. I did find one mistake, but as a writer myself, I'm editing, so I saw a translation mistake. And that's okay, because it was kind of a hard word. So this edition, 2021 by Europa, oh, that's funny. I just saw the original title here. It's Not Monogatari. And I wonder if that's her name, you know, that's a play on Natsuko. And I'm going to ask my daughter, who speaks Japanese. And I don't know when it was written in Japan, but I have a feeling it's quite a few years ago. So what else I want to say with it? Okay, so it's not a plot-driven novel. You know, if you're looking for, you know, a lot of plot, you're not going to find it. Sometimes it seems to go down a lot of different paths. So the breasts are, the sister works at a hostess bar, and she's, in the beginning of the book, she's obsessed with getting art with, it's really funny actually. She's obsessed with her breasts, and because she's getting older, she's in her 30s, and she works in a hostess bar. She feels that she'll make more money if she had implants, and she goes, you know, down this rabbit hole of looking, you know, for looking for places that that will give her the implants that she desires. And in the first part, you see her daughter. Her daughter is a young girl. In the first part of the book, Midori Iko, and in the beginning, she's writing sort of a diary about her life, and that's part of the first part, and that's why it doesn't really continue into the second part. So maybe it feels a little disjointed in the second part. There's so much going on here, but yet it's like not plot driven. So the daughter, and that's Mikiko's daughter, Midori Iko, she's struggling with, you know, having her menstrual period, and, you know, thinking everything is icky and disgusting, and what her mother is doing, you know, looking to get her breasts enlarged is disgusting. You know, she's being a teenager, and she, in the beginning of the book, the first half, she's not speaking to her mother. And she only writes whatever she wants to say, and then she shows it to her. And, you know, this reaches a boiling point when they visit Natsuko in Tokyo. So that part was really interesting. This also goes into the part that kind of disturbed me about the main character, who's the writer, and of course Natsuko Natsumi. And you know, she's struggling to be a writer, and she's also struggling with the thought of artificial insemination, ergo the eggs, menstrual in artificial insemination, and the you know, how does artificial insemination really affect the child that's born, that doesn't have a choice? But really no child really has a choice of whether they're born or not. But it was an interesting philosophy, you know what I mean, idea. And I think that, you know, all of the things that she brings up in this book is something that women go through daily. Okay, so what bothered me? What bothered me was, and it could be translation, and maybe it's not, but the main character, Natsuko, had a boyfriend all through high school, and she couldn't make love to him without feeling like she wanted to die. So that's pretty, you know, a strong sentiment. And I don't think it's only translation. When you read the whole book, you realize that there's a lot of poverty that she came from, and a bad relationship with her father, though it's not really brought out, you know, to every detail about it. But yeah, I wanted that explored a little bit. And there's a sort of a relationship in this book with Natsuko, but you know, she has to deal with the fact that she wants to have a child or not. And since she doesn't want to make love to anybody, it would have to be artificial insemination. And if she had artificial insemination, in Japan at that time, they only allowed couples to do it. Anyway, I told you more about this book than there's much more in it, and I haven't spoiled anything. But I think that this book was written for Japanese women who are dealing with whether they want to have children or not. You know, they live in a society where the man was, you know, king. You know, we live in a society like that, but I think they're a little bit behind when it comes to women's liberation and feminism. This is a very feminist book for Japan. You might not think of it as feminist, but it's the most unusual book I've ever read. And I think you should at least give it a chance. You know, maybe it's more written for women, but I think men can get something out of it as well. It's just, it really, I couldn't stop reading it. Even when I was saying, okay, she's doing this, you know, the writer is doing this or doing that I don't agree with. Anyway, I can't give it a star rating because I think it would be unfair to the book and to the audience. I just say try it and see if any of these themes, you know, hit you, you know, try it. And I've also read Heaven, that I already talked about, which was also a very and I gave it a 5-star rating, her book Heaven. So that was about bullying. So that's Mieko Kawakami, Breasts and Eggs. I also read a Barbara Pym that I'll talk about in another video, No Fawn, Return of Love, and that wasn't a 5-star. That was a 4-star read for me. And but however, next month, and this is a little teaser, I have a feeling this is going to be a 5-star read, and it's called A Glass of Blessings by Barbara Pym. Barbara Pym never disappoints me to the point that I would give her a 1 or a 2-star rating. You know, it's either 4 or 5. So she's a writer that I have to read. You know, I'm going to be a completist on Barbara Pym. And, you know, I might be a completist on, as well, on Kawakami. The other book that I haven't read yet, but I'm reading, is a novel by Anita Brookner, who I'm not sure will be, you know, will be a 5-star writer for me. I almost DNF'd this book, and it's called Making Things Better. I won't talk about it now because I started reading it again, and I'm sort of like getting interested in it. But I just read a book that was very similar to it, and I'm wondering if all her books are quite similar. But I'll talk about this later. So, you know, that wasn't much of an August wrap-up. Usually I read many more books, but the books that I have read that have touched me deeply. I'm a very emotional person, so something in a book has to touch me emotionally. Either it's the characters or the author, him or herself, trying to, you know, what they're trying to say that's so, you know, that really touches my heart, or has a topic that touches my heart. So these are the books that I read in August. But in September, I plan to read more, but more things that I think I'm going to love more, if that makes any sense. So that's my August wrap up. I'm not going to say it's part 1 because I really only read one other book that I'll talk about in another video, like I said. But anyway, tell me what you think. Do you sometimes get overwhelmed with BookTube? I mean, it's like I want to read from my shelves, but I keep on going to the library and picking out books, and then I have to read this book. It's a library book. And then I do, and sometimes that works and sometimes that doesn't work out for me. But yeah, so I plan to have a very nice September. I'm going to participate in a small way with Shorty September. I have a lot of short books that I want to read. And I really want to read King Lear for Shake-Tember, but I'm not putting any pressure on myself. You know, if I feel overwhelmed, I'll feel anxious, and then I won't enjoy my reading experience. And that's why we're here, to enjoy our reading experience and to connect with other readers. And that's why I'm on BookTube at 72. So please, if you haven't already subscribed, please do so. I'd really appreciate that, and you know, comment and press the notification bell and like. So I know you're watching this. That would really make me feel really good. So until we meet again, I'll bid you all good health and aloha.